There is a building in San Francisco where the internet once passed through like blood through an artery. Fiber trunks, backbone circuits, traffic that didn't belong to one person, but to millions. And inside that building, there was a room you weren't meant to know existed. No public sign, no official purpose. A secure door, a code name. A room built to receive copies. In 2003, an AT&T technician named Mark Klein says he encountered internal schematics for something unusual. Equipment that appeared designed to split the flow of internet traffic, duplicating it, then routing the copy into a secure space below. Not a targeted tap, not a single line, a pipeline. Most surveillance stories start with a person, a suspect, a name. This one starts with infrastructure. Because if the system is built to copy everything, the target is not an individual. The target is possibility. After 9/11, the US government entered a new phase. Surveillance justified by emergency expanded through secrecy. In December 2005, reporting revealed that President Bush had secretly authorized the NSA to conduct warrantless eavesdropping inside the United States, without the court-approved warrants normally required. It wasn't just a story about listening. It was a story about permission. But permission on paper means nothing without cooperation in the real world. To monitor communications at scale, you don't just need lawyers and directives. You need access. You need pipes. You need rooms. Room 641A is associated with an AT&T facility at 611 Folsom Street in San Francisco. Inside, Klein described a secure space, referred to in documents as a, quote, secure room, positioned beneath the internet room, where major fiber circuits carried traffic across the network. He wasn't assigned to operate the room. He says he saw the architecture around it, enough to understand the purpose, inputs, outputs, and the missing explanation in between. That distinction matters. This isn't a spy story where someone overhears a conversation. This is a systems story where the most important action is silent. A duplicate path created in hardware, so the original traffic continues and the copy goes somewhere else. At the center of Klein's account is a simple concept with catastrophic implications: a splitter. In fiber networks, a splitter can duplicate a signal, creating two identical flows. One goes where it's supposed to go. The other can be routed to analysis equipment. That's the difference between intercepting a line and cloning the backbone. This is why room 641A became a symbol. Because if a splitter is positioned at the right point in the network, it doesn't just access one customer. It touches every signal that passes through that physical location, domestic and international mixed together in the same bloodstream. A machine doesn't care who you are. It cares where your packets travel. And this is where the story becomes uncomfortable. The difference between targeted surveillance and bulk capability is not a philosophical debate. It's a wiring decision. A copied signal is useless unless you can process it. In Klein's declaration and supporting discussion around the facility, a name appears: Narus. Equipment associated with high-speed traffic analysis, deep packet inspection, semantic analysis, filtering at scale. These aren't listening devices, they are sorting machines. This is where people misunderstand the threat. They think it means someone reads every message. That's not how modern surveillance works. At scale, machines don't read. They index, they flag, they correlate. They turn communication into searchable structure. Who talked to whom, when, how often, through which services, and in some designs, potentially what was said, depending on encryption and collection rules. The machine doesn't need to understand you. It only needs to classify you. And once classification exists, the most dangerous step is not collection, it's query. Because at that point, surveillance becomes something else. A memory you didn't consent to create. Mark Klein wasn't a politician. He wasn't a hacker. He was a technician, someone trained to keep systems running and keep his head down. In 2006, he came forward publicly, providing documents and a sworn account describing the secure room and the split architecture as he understood it. And the story detonated, because it wasn't a rumor, it was diagrams. Media later revisited the account repeatedly, including public broadcasting coverage focused on Room 641A and its implications. But notice the pattern. Whenever surveillance is exposed, the argument shifts away from "did it happen?" and toward "can you prove the details?" That is the design. Because secrecy doesn't need innocence. It only needs doubt. Klein's disclosure didn't end surveillance. It did something more dangerous. It showed the public what mass access could look like in physical form. Wiring, racks, secure doors, built into civilian infrastructure. The Electronic Frontier Foundation filed a class action, Hepting versus AT&T, alleging AT&T permitted and assisted the NSA in unlawful monitoring of communications routed through its network. The case became a test of the modern surveillance era. What happens when the evidence is partly public and partly locked behind national security? This is where the system protects itself. Not with guns, with procedure. With claims that certain facts cannot be litigated without exposing secrets. Even when the public can see the outline of the mechanism, the inside of the mechanism remains sealed, like a room with no windows and a door labeled "Trust us." Then came the pivot that surveillance stories always reach. Accountability approaches, and the rules change. In 2008, Congress passed amendments to surveillance law that included provisions widely described as granting retroactive immunity to telecommunications companies for their role in the government's domestic spying program. This is not a cinematic twist. It's an administrative one, the cleanest kind. And that's the central Cipher dossier's theme, echoing the dossiers you've already seen. Exposure does not guarantee consequence. Sometimes exposure is absorbed, processed, and filed away. Sometimes the system doesn't deny what happened. It makes it unpunishable. That is erasure, not of the act, but of the outcome. Here is the line we will not cross. This dossier is about claims, evidence presented publicly, and the architecture described by a whistleblower and litigated by civil liberties groups. Room 641A became famous because it suggested capability at a scale most people didn't realize was physically possible. But surveillance systems are designed with a second shield, ambiguity. Not everything can be shown. Not everything can be proven publicly. And in that fog, institutions thrive. That's why the story isn't just the NSA spied. The deeper story is critical communication infrastructure can be repurposed into collection architecture, quietly and for years, without the people using it ever noticing. No alarms, no pop-ups, no warnings, just a copy being made. When people imagine surveillance, they picture headphones and tape reels. Room 641A is different. It's the modern form, quiet, automated, and frictionless. Once collection is built into the pipe, it stops feeling like an operation. It becomes a property of the network, like gravity. And it creates a new kind of power. Not the power to catch a criminal, but the power to map society, to see associations, patterns, clusters, to detect dissent before it becomes action, to watch journalists talk to sources, to watch whistleblowers hesitate. This is why privacy is not a luxury. It's the space where conscience survives. And here's the most cynical truth. The more automated surveillance becomes, the less any individual feels responsible for it. A tech installs a cabinet. A manager signs a request. A lawyer rubber stamps a memo. A server keeps humming. And nobody feels like the villain. That is how history repeats. Cleanly. Room 641A endures, because it's not just a location. It's a warning in architectural form. If you can't see the collection, you can't measure it. If you can't measure it, you can't debate it honestly. And if you can't debate it, you can't consent. Every generation gets its own version of this story. A secret authority expands. A whistleblower exposes a fragment. Then the system learns and adapts, becoming quieter, cleaner, harder to prove. That is the cycle. Silence to exposure to erasure. And the public is left arguing about details, while the architecture remains. If you want to understand modern intelligence, stop looking for the spy. Look for the room. Look for the splitter. Look for the place where the copy is made. Because once the copy exists, the only real question is, who gets to know it was ever taken?